All right. Good evening, everybody. It is 7 p.m. in NYC. I'm Sam Kimball from Crush Wine Experiences. And thank you so much for joining us on virtual day trip to wine country presented by the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. We are here for a New York wine guide for Valentine's Day. We're going to sample 5 great wines from 5 highly esteemed New York State wineries. And we're going to hear all about the ways they can make your Valentine's celebrations more special this season. And we're going to hear about 3 really amazing wine destinations from around New York State, where if you're not familiar with this region as a wine region, there are nearly 500 wineries, and where the state is the 4th largest wine growing region in the US. So our theme is Valentine's Day. What wines should you plan for your Valentine's celebrations? And frankly, you know, our wines are all from New York State. So let's back up and talk about this region and set the stage for the conversation. New York is home to absolutely beautiful wine growing areas where each and every bottle reflects the diverse climates, the soils, the topographies that make it great. Also, New York State wines are no longer the forgotten cousins of other US wine regions. As we sit here in 2022, they are world-class. New York wines, New York wineries, and the region have become a world-class player in the wine industry. We're not talking about quaint growing areas in New York's backyard anymore. We're talking about wineries winning national and international awards every year. And for example, take 2021 alone. A New York winery was named to Wine and Spirits magazine's top 100 wineries. Another New York winery was featured in the same list. A New York winery was named to the Wine Spectator's top 100. That's in the world, top 100 in the world. New York wineries are recognized in all kinds of awards, lineups, and different publications in our industry. I could go on and on. There's plenty more, but the bottom line is that New York wines are on a world stage now and grabbing the spotlight. So tonight we're going to meet key team members and the winemakers at 5 wineries that are contributing to this great emergence of New York wines into the world-class realm. And we have a saying in the wine business, the quality is in the bottle. And tonight's 5 selections are terrific examples of the quality being in the bottle. So I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us. Welcome one, welcome all. Please ask us any questions or make any comments in the chat in Zoom as we go. We'll answer those on the fly during the session. We want you to interrupt us. We want to hear from you. We want to get those questions. Also, if you would hit the chat right now, and I see people already doing that, and tell us where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing that, and it's great to see all the different areas that we cover. San Diego, I love it. Nebraska, Burr, yeah, Nebraska is definitely Burr right now. We've had that in New York too. New Jersey, just wow, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I think you're going to be pleased with what we find out from these 5 wineries and the 5 selections we're profiling. Brooklyn is in the house. I love that. Rochester, upstate. All right, so we're going to travel virtually to 3 places in New York State: Long Island wine country, the Finger Lakes wine region, and the Adirondacks. And I'm going to put up in my background on my screen, I'm going to put a map, and you can actually see, you know, above me, to my left, to my right, you can see the Finger Lakes that are right just above me to one side, the Finger Lakes region. Way up at the top, you can see the Adirondacks, and all the way down at the opposite corner, stick 100 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean, you see the Long Island wine region. Totally diverse, amazing places, very different terroir, different characteristics of wines, and just such a rich tableau of winemaking that happens in this state. Um, so we are going to be talking about all these different things. We're going to talk about the regions. We're going to talk about the wines. We're going to talk about foods that go with these wines. And we're going to see some really interesting imagery too that paint that picture even more three-dimensionally of New York State and the region. So without further ado, I am so excited to introduce our guests. We have with us Shelby Hearn, the general manager at Suru Wines. We have Ben Stamp, who's the winemaker at Lakewood Vineyards. Sasha Party, who's the owner and founder at Adirondack Winery. Stephen Taylor, member of the founding family at Bully Hill Vineyards up in the Finger Lakes. And Alex Jankowski, the marketing manager at Wagner Vineyards, also up in the Finger Lakes. Welcome, you guys. It is so great having you here. We're really going to learn so much about your wineries and your wines and these selections. Sasha, I want to start with you. What wine and food combinations are you guys at Adirondack Winery thinking about and planning on for Valentine's Day?
Yeah, great. So the wine that I'm featuring tonight is our Stargazer, which is a Lemberger. I'm trying to hold this close to my body here. So this is our Lemberger wine, and I'll talk more about that later. But at our tasting room in Lake George, New York, which is, up in the North Country, we are doing a Valentine's wine and chocolate pairing plate that people are having a lot of fun with. We just started it today, actually. And we have some Cabernet Sauvignon infused truffles that we've had made with our wine, Berry Breeze truffles, semi-sweet Riesling truffles, so lots of unique chocolates and definitely some locally made items. That's one of our specialties. We have a champagne cheddar, a chocolate cherry chev, and some vine dried raisins that are dipped in dark chocolate. So I know your mouths are watering hearing about that. We have suggestions for 7 different wines to pair with each of the items on the plate. And then for those of you that can't attend our wine tastings at our tasting room, we have our Valentine's date night kit, which is available on our website. And with that, you get 6 different either dry or semi-sweet fruit infused wines. And we're giving you those vine dried raisins covered in chocolate, a cherry chic chocolate bar, and just some suggestions on Valentine's date night games. So that's a really fun thing if you're going to stay in with your Valentine. Yeah, so that's what we've got at Adirondack Winery for Valentine's.
That is so cool. Well, we've already got some questions about the winery. We're going to tackle those momentarily when we dig deeper into the Lemberger Stargazer that you mentioned. But how about you, Ben, at Lakewood? What's the agenda there, holiday, in terms of the Valentine's holiday, food and wine wise?
Well, we actually just wrapped up here on Seneca Lake with the Chocolate and Wine Weekend, which is one of several of our famous wine trail events here as part of the Seneca Lake Wine Trail. So we saw about 600 people coming from all over the areas, coming here, and they enjoyed a wine and food pairing at each of the wineries. And the wine that we actually paired this week was the Bubbly Candeo, which you guys are going to taste, and we'll talk about a little bit more here in a minute. But wine, maybe this is not an appropriate opinion to have during a Valentine's segment, but I think wine is a really tough thing to pair with chocolate in many circumstances, because it pretty much precludes everything except for the sweetest, richest wines. And maybe if you're just starting off your meal, that's not what you're going for. So we devised a recipe using cocoa nibs and made this cocoa nib pesto, which was really tasty as an appetizer. We paired it with our Bubbly Candeo, and the crowd loved it. So think a little outside the box sometimes, and you can have a lot more fun with it.
No, that is great. Have you ever done anything with cocoa nibs and infusing the wine into the chocolate and then serving that chocolate in the tasting room?
We haven't, but it sounds, we do have some leftover cocoa nibs, so there might be some experimentation going on here soon. That does sound like fun.
Excellent. All right. And Stephen, is there a quintessential Bully Hill Vineyards selection for Valentine's?
Well, to kind of to go on what Ben said, it is very hard to pair with chocolate. One of the quintessential pairings just in general in the wine world is dark chocolate and port, something very sweet that has, intense tannins. It's going to sound crazy, but I actually think our Sweet Walter Red, which is a Concord-based sweet wine, is comparable to a lighter alcohol port. So if you were going to pair that, that would work fantastic with a lighter chocolate, or even like a milk chocolate, like a Cab Franc would be. The rule of thumb really is if you don't have enough tannins in your red, then what's going to end up happening is that's going to really come out as a astringent taste when you have that dark chocolate. So
explain for our audience, when you talk about tannins, tell us a little bit about what that means, what you're referring to.
yeah, tannin is the component of wine when you taste it that kind of gives you that cotton ball feeling in your mouth. You normally get that with a red wine. Usually that's, when you ferment with the skins on, that comes from skins, seeds. Now some reds, you're going to have a little bit less tannin extraction, especially in the Finger Lakes. That's very important because as we talk about Cab Franc, some years the tannins are nice and ripe and some less so.
Yep. I like to liken also the tannins and that drying sensation to, if you put a black English breakfast tea bag in your cup in the morning and the phone rings and you forget about it and you come back 20 minutes later, that tea is really bitter and dry.
Yeah.
It's a lot of tannins. Excellent. All right. So let's talk terroir a little bit, because we have such different geographies and climates in these regions. Shelby, tell us a little bit about the Long Island wine country. It's a maritime climate. What makes it so great for growing grapes?
Sure. So we're a cool maritime climate on the North Fork, and we have a number of components that I think make us a really interesting and unique growing region. Long Island is comprised completely of glacial deposits, so we are primarily sandy loam soils. And as the glaciers receded over Long Island, they dropped very different segments of soil in different areas. The North Fork of Long Island, which does have the vast majority of the planted grapes of the region, is primarily sandy loam. We have really nice, great drainage in our soil, as well as some pretty moderate water holding capacity, which makes for very well suited soil to grapevines. In addition to that, being that we are an island, we're surrounded on three sides by water, which really acts to moderate our temperatures. So it means in the summer, when we have those really hot days, we have the cool ocean breezes that cool us off and keep the humidity from settling onto the vines. And in the winter, when it gets a little bit colder, we have those bodies of water surrounding us on three sides, again, keeping it a little bit warmer so we don't have as much temperature affecting the vines throughout the growing season. So I think it overall makes for a really great growing season across the board.
Yeah, it is truly maritime. You're surrounded by ocean water on the North Fork and the eastern end of Long Island. Alex, Wagner Vineyards is in the Finger Lakes wine region on Seneca Lake. And for folks who haven't been up there, these are really, the lakes are really long, like 40 plus miles, a couple of them. Really large bodies of water, quite narrow. What is it about the terroir there that makes the wine so good?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than having a meeting at a winery just on the other side of the lake that, as the crow flies, is maybe 2 miles. But you're talking about an hour drive all the way around the lake just to get there. We haven't invested in a channel yet, but maybe one day. But when talking about the terroir, it's actually not too dissimilar from what Shelby was discussing when you talk about glacial deposits, loamy soils, which in wetter years can lead to really high vigor on the vines. So a lot of canopy management is something we're thinking about a lot. And that's sitting on primarily a shale bedrock. And you might see sometimes when discussing, especially Riesling, which is the wine that we have as one of our Rieslings tonight, there's a minerality to it. And sometimes folks will attribute that to the shale bedrock. Minerality is one of those wine jargon terms that you're going to hear about 50 different definitions of, but you know it when you taste it, I guess you can say. But when talking about, at least when you talk about Wagner Vineyards and our 240 acres, it is all about Seneca Lake and our proximity on the east side of Seneca Lake. And the lake itself, at its deepest, 640 feet deep, the last time the lake froze over was in 1912.
Wow.
Some older members of the Wagner family had heard stories about being able to ice skate across the lake has not been able to happen in over 100 years. And it's very similar to how it is in Long Island, where there's a prevailing northwest wind that comes over that deepest part of the lake. Constantly moving waters will help raise the temperature of that wind a couple degrees in the winter, will help lower the temperature of that wind a couple degrees in the summer, preserving acidity, which is huge, of course, for a grape like Riesling and a few of the other varieties that we grow. And it's led to this small strip being known as the banana belt, because it's slightly more tropical, not because it's warm enough that you could actually grow bananas too successfully or anything like that, but it's slightly warmer in the winter, and especially a winter in a month like we just had in January, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wanted to put that picture up because it's just striking. You know, the lake is so long and narrow and but large. I mean, it's a really large body of water right next to the vineyard and the grapes there. Stephen, for those who don't really know it well or haven't been, Lake Keuka Lake that you're on is different microclimate in certain aspects. What's the terroir and what are the distinctive aspects about Keuka versus Seneca and the others?
Well, the first thing I would definitely say is our lake freezes over. I think it was 2013 was the last time that it did that completely. And so that's going to tell you a lot about just, how less deep it is. It's 21 miles from Hammondsport to Penny End, from tip to bottom. And obviously everyone knows it for it being the lake that looks like a Y. So that is like when you're at Keuka, you're at the one that kind of has that fork at the point of the bluff. In terms of soil, we have a lot of shale, limestone, a little bit of clay. And I always say that the key point between Keuka and Seneca Lake is Seneca Lake gets on average 1 degree warmer per growing day. So that's really important to know that, when you are thinking about, the wines that you want to have that are going to require the longest growing, degree days, you're going to want to put them on Seneca. But the advantage for Keuka Lake is if you want wines with acid retention, say like a Riesling, Keuka Lake's going to be fantastic for that. So that's kind of, I would say, the two biggest differences between that. And when you see climate change, the Rieslings are coming out a lot riper now. 10 years ago, even, from where they were back then. So it's interesting. We're still trying to see, what that looks like 10 years from now.
Super interesting. We have a request, Stephen, for a story. He didn't get my goat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what the reference is. I'm just reading it.
No, that's okay. Yeah. So long story short, I'm trying to do this for a panel. The story is, we used to be a part of the Taylor Wine Company, which you remember from the ports and sherries that, were in every liquor store. Unfortunately, our family was fired by Coca-Cola when they purchased them, in the late 60s. They thought wine coolers were going to be the future. Before they fired Dad, one of the things that they said was, we want to start bringing in tanker car wine. At the time, it was only 50% of whatever you had to put in was New York State. So you would do 50%, Concord, 50%, bulk wine from Algeria or California or whatever it was cheapest from. Maybe you throw a little bit of water in there, it doesn't matter. And, Dad went out against that. He would tour the country trolling his own family company before they finally fired him. And so when they fired him and he started the Walter S. Taylor Wine Company, Taylor said, well, listen, you don't own the name Taylor. That's our company now. And so they asked him to give all of his winemaking materials, anything that said Taylor on it. And one of the things that he took with him was a goat. And on the side of the goat, that he wrote a big sign that said Taylor on it. And so he gave the goat to Coca-Cola, and it bit some lady, and it just became this PR nightmare. And eventually Atlanta was like, what's going on up there? You need to just get rid of this goat. So they gave the goat back to Dad, and he said, they took my name and heritage, but they'll never get my goat. So that is, kind of like the beginning of the story.
That's awesome. What a great story.
Thank you.
I love that.
That perfectly encapsulates the spirit of the Finger Lakes right there.
Thank you.
I think it encapsulates the Finger Lakes and wineries and founders all over that are of that same mindset. All right, so let's get into tasting some wines. We have a great lineup. Shelby, we're going to start with you. You are profiling your 2019 Suru Wines Sauvignon Blanc. Let's talk about a little bit about the winery first. Give us a little background on what your position and kind of strategy and point of difference as a winery has been, and then let's get into this wine.
Sure. So Suru is a family-owned and operated winery. We were started in 2008 by my mother, whose name is Susan, and then my father is our winemaker. His name is Russell, and our last name is Hearn. So it's Susan, Russell, Hearn, all smushed together, and you get Suru. And Suru was really started as a passion project between my parents. My father's been a winemaker on the East End for a little over 30 years and has worked quite extensively across New York State for a number of wineries in the Finger Lakes, on the North Fork, as well as across the US in Massachusetts, Virginia, and California, and in his home country of Australia, as well as New Zealand and France. So we come with a very kind of diverse global winemaking background, and we're trying to really instill that global perspective as well as our deep-rooted love for the North Fork and New York wine into every bottle that we make. So we're making a very small selection of wines that made from the varietals that we are most passionate about. So across the board, doing all very crisp, bright, dry, stainless steel fermented whites and all medium-bodied soft henna reds.
And very fruit forward.
Absolutely. And I think, particularly the Sauvignon Blanc that we're featuring really does a really nice job of showcasing that. My parents met originally in New Zealand and fell in love kind of over New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So while this is not a New Zealand style Sauvignon Blanc,
this is about 1.5% residual sugar. So it's right there in the semi-dry range. I think most people think that it's maybe just a touch drier than it is because the carbonation and the effervescence makes it seem a little bit drier, makes it taste a little bit drier, but it definitely opens it up to a lot of different food pairings. One of our favorite pairings with this wine is a recipe that my sister came up with. It's a delicious cold pasta salad made with rotini, avocado, bacon, and lemon zest, and it's just really fresh and delicious. And that's one that we often do, even sometimes as a gluten-free recipe for her husband, who is a celiac. So it can be made in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. Talk a little bit about the grape. I mean, is it 100% Cayuga?
This is 100% Cayuga, and I've had wine professionals debate me on that before, as if I wasn't the one to make it. I promise it is. It's 100% free run. And if you do a nice cold fermentation with Cayuga, in addition to the typical kind of floral and Granny Smith apple characters that you usually get from Cayuga, we also get some nice tropical fruit character and a little bit of a honeysuckle note. And a little bit of extra time on the lees gives a nice kind of creamy texture to this wine, which definitely plays well with the carbonation when this hits your palate. So it's one of those wines that we love it on a daily basis as just kind of your before dinner wine. If you're cooking something and you want something to take the edge off, it's fun for that. We say this wine is to dinner what foreplay is to, well, you get the idea. But it's a fun wine for getting your evening going, and it's just really easy to sip and pair with any appetizer that you're rolling out. So
now we have folks who are tuned in from all over, West Coast, Midwest. Cayuga is a native grape.
Well, Cayuga is actually it's an interspecific hybrid that was developed at Cornell University specifically for our cool climate here. It's a large green grape with a thick skin, and it has a nice kind of floral and apple flavor when you pick it. We pick it a little bit early because we like the acidity in this wine to really pop. It helps keep the freshness in the bottle. In addition to that, we only split the skins and take the juice that falls out naturally. So by not actually squeezing these grapes in our press, we don't extract any of the bitter phenolics. And that's one of the reasons that this wine is so crisp and clean and smooth on the palate. And it's definitely one of the things that has catapulted this in our in our lineup to being one of our favorite wines. So.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting in the development of this, and it's such a success story for the winery. I want to show everybody just really quickly one vantage point of your place there on Seneca Lake, because it's really dramatic, and you see what Alex was talking about, you know, and chime in here, Ben, but this body of water, left to right, as we look at this picture, is what, about 40 miles from one end to the other?
Yeah, that's right. So, and you can see our lower vineyards there are pretty close to the lake. Wagner Vineyards, which Alex was showing you some pictures of earlier, is kind of would be just off to the top left corner of your screen there if you were to look at it. So he's right across the lake from us. But like we said earlier, in the Finger Lakes, just because you're close as the crow flies doesn't mean that we get to see each other very often, because it can be quite a trip around the lake. But it's a long lake. It's between 1.25 and a little over 2 miles wide at the widest point. So it holds a lot of heat, and you know, you can see some pretty dramatic pictures as well sometimes in the winter, when the coldest nights bring out the steam, and the lake there's a good picture that actually was taken during the fall. You can see the colors of the leaves during a particularly cold morning. You'll have steam actually coming off the lake, and that's what provides the microclimate for us to grow premium wine grapes here in the Finger Lakes, because that steam will help to warm the lake shores, extending our growing season in the fall, protecting against the coldest of the winter temperatures in the winter. And when it gets colder in the spring, it'll actually delay the bud break on our vines until after the last spring frost has occurred, allowing us to grow grapes that might try to bloom a little bit early. And so by keeping it a little cooler in the spring, it moderates our season, much to the same way the Atlantic Ocean does to all the vineyards out on the North Fork of Long Island. So this is a picture of our harvester moving through some of our reds there, and you can see the lake in the background. So our tasting room is literally, about 100 feet from where this picture was taken, and it's right in the midst of our vineyards, overlooking Seneca Lake. And we're open 361 days a year. So if you're ever planning a trip up to the Finger Lakes, please stop in and see us. We'd love to have you.
Quick question before we move on to the third wine. If you wanted to go see Alex, how long a ride is that if you weren't taking a boat across that 1 mile of water?
Well, if Alex is going to come pick me up in a boat, I'm always down for a boat ride, but it's probably about 30 minutes around. As the crow flies, maybe 8 miles, maybe 7. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, luckily our roads are pretty good, but they don't go across the lake. They only go around. It's about,
and luckily for me, I live in Watkins Glen. So I'm actually, like, when I'm home, which I am now, I'm like 5 minutes from Lakewood. So yeah, the bubbly Candejo's on the boat with me quite a bit in the summer.
Cheers. And thanks for mentioning that. We're doing the Candejo in cans as well. Awesome. So that it can go anywhere your romantic endeavors take you. And we've started doing it at the request of restaurants during COVID, who were able to sell their wine to go, but didn't break into entire bottles of bubbly. We started doing it in these 187 milliliters. So this is an airline size bottle. It's a quarter of a bottle. We call them poppers here amongst the staff, but they're a lot of fun. They're easy, and you can stick a few of those in your fridge for when you're just having one. So we're messing around with some different formats to keep it as convenient as we can for everybody.
No, that's great. Well, thank you, Ben. All right, let's go north to the Adirondacks. And to Sasha, you're going to profile your Adirondack Winery Stargazer, which is Lemberger is the grape.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so I wanted to get you guys in the mood a little bit with the background here. So just to show you, this is in the heart of the Adirondacks. This is the Ausable Lake. And this is a photo that was taken by Alex Kelly that we use on the label of, get in front of this here, of our Stargazer wine. And we called it Stargazer partially too, because nobody really, knows Lemberger that well, also known as Blaufränkisch. I mean, if you guys have never tried it, I would recommend that you give it a try. He put the screen up there for a minute, but you can buy Stargazer at 80kwinery.com/Stargazer.
I'm curious how many people are really familiar with this grape. Well, Scott, yeah, you it's one of your favorites. So you have expanded not only yours but our palates. And it's great to see people who are trying these wines, because one of the things that a lot of people more casual wine enthusiasts don't realize is that there are 5,000 wine grapes in the world. And but most Americans, and I'm guilty of this too from time to time, are just stuck in those 5 or 6 grapes that we all know. So Alicia has tasted it, but bummer, you don't ship to California.
Nope, that's one of the states that we unfortunately cannot ship to.
And tell us a little bit about the provenance of Adirondack Winery.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, we were started in 2008. My husband and I started the winery really because we just loved wine, and we wanted to find a business to run together. We love the Adirondacks, and Lake George just seemed like a great place to start for us. But we were I like to say, one of the very first micro wineries in the country. And our whole business is based around bringing wine to the people, as opposed to having a vineyard in our backyard. So we source our grapes from primarily the Finger Lakes, but also a little bit from like Erie, Niagara, Ontario regions. We make over 35 different wines, and we're always bringing in different varieties. And we believe, our main focus is on the customer. So we're all about being approachable at our tasting room in Lake George. And we tailor the wine tasting experience exactly to every customer. Nobody has, an insufficient palate. Like, everybody's taste is important. And we are, our goal is to find the right wine for them. So we really make a variety from semi-sweet dry red, semi-sweet whites and reds to, the traditional dry whites and reds. And we throw in some really unique ones there. Like, we have a lavender infused white wine. We do a apple pie infused wine. So those are some fun ones that we do. And then the only other thing I would want to say is that we are actually under construction right now on a brand new $2.6 million facility in Queensbury, where we're located right off of exit 18 off of 87. And we have a brand new tasting room and event facility opening there, where with our farm winery license, we'll be able to not only do tastings like we've been doing for the last 14 years, but we'll be able to, serve wine by the glass, beer, cider, spirits from other New York folks, and, feature the foods that we've been, for the local producers that we've been working with. And finally, we can do events and classes and all sorts of fun things. So we're really looking forward to that. And of course, we'll be able to produce 3 times as much wine as we can make now, because we have been bursting at the seams for many years.
Well, congratulations to you. You were at the vanguard of the micro winery movement. And it's so heartening to see, the success you've had and the expansion, and the focus on hospitality, which is such a key these days in our industry. We're no longer just about, putting some wine in bottles, but also really, extending hospitality to the wine consuming public.
Yeah, I mean, we really believe that, we are here to turn wine learners into wine lovers. And it's about the customer.
Absolutely. We have a couple of notes. I can't wait to see the finished building. And Bolton County location closed, but excited to visit the new location. So
yep.
All good. Oh, thank you, Sasha. Really exciting developments.
Thank you for having us.
Congratulations. So let's move on to Bully Hill Vineyards and Cab Franc. Cabernet Franc is the wine. And Stephen, I always like to remind people that the unofficial red wine grape of the state of New York is Cabernet Franc. It also happens to be one of the 6 noble grapes, the original French portfolio of grapes from France and coming over. Tell us a little bit about this wine. I think it's rather special. And it really is a great wine for food pairing as well.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to Scott's question about the climate difference between lake and ocean environments, because I think that's very important, and that is part of the reason why Cab Franc is here today in the Finger Lakes. We are cool continental, so that means that we have like a warmer summer and we have extremely cold winters. So we need grapes, that both from native to hybrids to vinifera that can kind of withstand that cold. Now, why Cab Franc compared to Cab Sauv, which is the more famous child grape of Cab Franc? Well, that's because it buds a little bit earlier than Cab Sauv, but also ripens a little bit earlier, and that's really important for this region. Also, when it comes in a little bit lighter, it tends to have a little bit more red fruit characteristics, and it tends to show its vintage variation. So, I always use the Loire Valley is like the perfect expression of Cab Franc in the old world. In a nice ripe year, you're going to get more of those black notes. In black fruit notes like black plum, blackberry. In the cooler years, you get more of that cranberry, raspberry, red cherry notes. So 2018 was a very cool, very wet year. So when you taste this wine, what you're getting is cranberry, raspberry. You get clove and vanilla from the oak.
Let's answer a couple of questions. Loving the wine label. So
thank you.
Kudos. I think Stephen, not Stephen Taylor, but Stephen who's watching had a question. Stephen, just put it in the chat if you would. Tell us a little bit about, Stephen, the strategy, the positioning. How did your family sort of point the compass, if you will, at Bully Hill? What types of wines did you set out to make? How is that mission continued? How has it evolved? What's your approach to winemaking?
Yeah, it really comes back down to, where are we in the world? We're in the Finger Lakes. What is the Finger Lakes? It's a vintage variation. And that means that, some years grapes aren't going to be as great as others. That's why it's very important to have, a basket of currencies, a bunch of different varietals that you can focus on and kind of take people through that journey to show what the Finger Lakes is about. It's not just Cab Franc and Riesling, it's Concord, it's Catawba, it's Niagara. But it's also Cayuga, it's St. Croix. It's a lot of those new world hybrids that are much more cold resistant that we're seeing more of in the Finger Lakes. And we carry all of those. For us, we do have distribution in close to 30 states. Sometimes we are, the first impression for the Finger Lakes for a lot of consumers. So we try to be as hospitable and as entertaining, but also as educational as possible to kind of give people an example of all the different kinds of wines that we're making. Because what sets us apart from, say, Burgundy, which is only doing, 2 different varietals in Aligoté.
I'm a pasta guy. I'm a Mediterranean sort of menu person. So I like this with a pink sauce. It's a little lighter. This is being a medium-bodied and complex red, and not too tannic. I think there's some really nice sort of in the middle of the weight spectrum in terms of Italian dishes that go with this. Is there a big push from the New York Wine Association or associations of New York wineries and to get rid of the state shipping bans? That's a question from Scott.
I can jump in there for just a sec if you want. It's been a generational battle, really, that has taken, it took a long time, first off, to allow the states to decide for themselves. And now each state is going one-to-one to create their own arrangements. And some of the states are just the documentation or licensing fees that they charge don't make it really feasible to get you can tell that there were some of the big players in the room when the legislation was written in those states, but it's something that we fight with on a constant basis, and just chipping away at it a little bit at a time. Is that a pretty good Does everybody else feel like that's a pretty good characterization?
Yeah, and I would add
It's
too,
been
not
going on for a
even,
long time.
yeah, not even the cost of the license, but sometimes you're limited only, you know, up to 2 cases a year to a single household in that state. And then, you know, they're limiting you that way where it still just can't be cost effective. So yeah, it's a state by state battle.
The interesting thing is that it's sometimes pitched as a way to protect their homegrown wine industry, but it usually only comes from states that have no wine
Right.
production, which is kind of strange, but
like Utah.
so I'm calling shenanigans on that. I won't get on the soapbox about it.
I think the word is malarkey. All right. Well, that was great. Thank you, Stephen. Alex, we're going to move to you and Wagner Vineyards. The unofficial white wine grape of the state of New York is Riesling. And so you've got this Wagner Vineyards 2020 Riesling Select. This is a slightly sweeter selection. That's a perfect complement to the end of a Valentine's Day celebration meal. Tell us a little bit about this wine and how you guys approached it and what are its characteristics.
Sure, yeah, and I would be remiss as just a general lover of New York wines if I didn't say this is the longest in a virtual tasting on New York wines we've gone without talking about Riesling, and I think that's awesome because I love to see so many different varieties talked about. Don't get me wrong, as I'm going to wax poetic for the next 5 minutes about Riesling, I do love it and I love its versatility. And, you know, we certainly at Wagner owe so much to this grape. But I do think that, you know, it speaks volumes, just these other varieties and how well that they can stand as well and really help define the region and the state in total. So Wagner Vineyards, I'll back up slightly. I'll give you the elevator speech on the history of Wagner Vineyards. The family has been growing grapes in this region for over 100 years. For a long time, growing it for the Taylor Wine Company, growing grapes for the Taylor Wine Company, back when it was cool, back when it was awesome. And what changed was an act called the New York Farm Winery Act in 1976, which allowed grape growing to happen and winemaking to happen on a much smaller scale. So we're talking about the generational fight for individual state shipping. There was such a fight as well to be able to sell your own wine at a licensing cost that made it feasible for smaller wineries. So Bill Wagner, in the early 70s, caught wind that this was happening. So as you see in this photo here, he started building a building up next to the vineyards. So that's Bill Wagner on the left, building our tasting room, which is still our tasting room today. To the right is his son, John Wagner, who is now the co-owner with his sister and still the vineyard manager out there every day. And I just love this photo because they built the building themselves. Wagner's philosophy has always been about controlling the process and not from some, you know, need for power, but just some, you know, the pride that comes with every single task when it comes to growing grapes and making wine. So they would farm their vineyards during the day. They would build the building at night. It took 3 years till we were able to open our doors in 1979. And just prior to that, in 1977 was when we planted our first Riesling, 8 acres of Riesling. For about 20 years, that was the only 8 acres of Riesling that we had. So whether, you know, what we love about Riesling is it can be made in a sweeter style, it can be made in a drier style. We were just using one clone on one 8-acre plot for all of these different varieties of Riesling until we started to say, okay, it's handling the winters consistently. It's consistently giving us great fruit. Let's expand. We now have 62 acres of Riesling, which is the largest planting of Riesling in the Finger Lakes.
Alex, is it a semi-dry Riesling or is it a sweet Riesling?
I would say medium sweet, you know, semi-sweet. It's just because, you know, we use the International Riesling Foundation scale, sweetness scale, which you can see on the back label of all of our Rieslings to really help pinpoint. And that's a formula that goes in terms of where you can't hide it. I can't lie to you about where it would fall in there. Where it falls is where it falls. And so we do make a semi-dry as well, which is more in the 1.5% to 2%. This is more in the 3.5 percent residual sugar.
All the different New York State wines are, the different varietals, the different styles. And this is a perfect example. I mean, this with a spicy Thai dish is just to die for. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I think the lower alcohol plays a huge role in that, right? Like the wine itself does not need to be cut with a knife and fork, or you're not pigeonholing yourself so much to have to pair it with a real fatty protein or something like that, because the wine is so heavy and there's so much tannin with it. Lighter bodied reds and then these aromatic white wines, they can run the gamut no matter what part of the meal you're at.
Absolutely. Well, we all need to get up and see you in the Finger Lakes, Alex, and cross the lake over to Lakewood and make our way over to Keuka as well. It's a magical region. For folks who are thinking about visiting New York, who are not based here, it's definitely a stop on your journey. I want to put up on the screen here just a reminder of how you can reach and connect with all 5 of these wineries. These are the websites, and the deals are great. We'll scroll through some of those momentarily, but take advantage of New York wine. It is special, and the fact of the matter is that it has really arrived on the world stage of excellence in our industry. I want to thank you guys for profiling your wines and hanging out with us tonight. We are officially, we're 6 days away from Valentine's Day. But that's not the only occasion with which to celebrate with these selections. So take advantage of them. We will scroll back up to a couple of these, a couple of the promo codes. In fact, I think what we'll do to make it easier for everybody is we'll send everyone an email tomorrow with the information, the URLs, so you can take advantage of these wines. I want to thank everyone who tuned in from around the country. It's great to see everybody. And I want to end with a tribute from the New York Wine and Grape Foundation to New York State wineries and wine growers, and raise a glass to them. And here's how it goes. We were never supposed to make it big. We could easily move and grow in perfect conditions, but we didn't. We leaned into adversity and came together as a family to make something out of nothing. Our future is not in algorithms. It's about customers, growers, and our members. It's for the people and by the people. Our collaborative ethos is irreverent, and in and of itself, we're an intrepid band of outsiders, and we're in this together, a family, and we believe in what we do. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the 5 wineries and folks for participating in this. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a wonderful Valentine's holiday. We will see you guys all back here. Anyone who's up for it, next Wednesday, the 16th, we're doing a special visit with Gurgitch Hills Estate Winery in Napa Valley. And that's going to be very fun. So be safe, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you very soon. Take care.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.